Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all very well. I know we may have some people from other parts of the world, so good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I hope you're all well, and thanks for joining today's session. Please do introduce yourself, tell us who you are and where you are in the chat, and obviously, please do share any other details. My name is Kishore Roy. I am the Regional Exams Manager for the British Council. I cover half of Southeast Asia. I'm based in Manila, and I'm delighted to be with you today. So a big welcome to the fourth and final session of the third National Symposium on English Language Assessment, brought to you by the British Council Indonesia Foundation in partnership with Teflon. For those of you who have joined the previous sessions, you will already know that the theme of this year's symposium has been looking to the future, language assessment 2020 and beyond. So far, we've looked at a variety of different angles. We've looked at assessment standards and reference frameworks, and in particular, we've looked at the CEFR, that's a Common European Reference for Languages. Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. We've looked at the need to increase the general level of English proficiency amongst language teachers in Indonesia. We've looked at various types of assessment, that's formative and summative, for instance, and linked them to possible changes in national assessment systems. We've looked at how AI is impacting the future of learning and assessment, and we'll be continuing that theme today with more practical solutions and tools. Throughout all these sessions, we've been looking to support you in how you tie up the key elements of teaching, learning and assessment. And obviously making sure that all of those are linked and support each other and combine with each other is really key to ensuring effective outcomes for your learners. We've got lots of participants on the call today, some of you on Zoom, some of you on YouTube. Rest assured, the session is exactly the same wherever you are, regardless of the platform you're on. So again, a warm welcome to all of you. A quick reminder on the house rules. My colleague will be sharing with us, I think. Thank you. Yeah, so just a reminder, the session is being recorded. So obviously your continued attendance implies you're okay with that. Today's session is designed to be interactive. So as I say, we encourage your questions and comments. Please just remember, mention your name, your organization and your location. And again, your feedback is really, really important to us. So please do complete the survey at the end of the session. And once you've done the survey, you can access the e-certificate and also the content from today's session as well. Okay, that's enough for me, I think. So let's dive into today's session. So firstly, I would like to introduce Dr. Gumiwang Jati. He is the president of ITEL, and he will be talking to us today about AI and particularly in relation to assessment for learning. So Bapak Jati, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Let me share my screen. So it's a pleasure for me to be here with you all. I'm going to talk a little bit about assessment for learning and the existence of AI. Of course, this is a very broad. I'm going to look at in a narrow way, a practical way. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about in brief what is AFL, then taking just a small concept on that, a bit of that concept. Then I'm going to look at the learning strategies for assessment for learning, what they are, what can we do. And then I'm going to look at AI for helping at a reading assessment for learning in the area of reading, speaking and writing. Okay, I will start with the survey first, very quick, Mentimeter. Can you go to menti.com and the code is 5510136 and try to answer that questions, please. I hope you don't have any problem with that. Yeah. Again, menti.com 5510536. Let's try this one. Just to check how you are you familiar with the assisting AI? Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, some of you familiar with the natural reader. So this AI, I'm going to look at that and how that can help teachers in doing the assessment for learning. Yeah. So Quillbolt is very popular. Like so, some using the Anki. Good. I wait until say around 50. Now there are 46 participants. Okay. $66. Thank you. Okay. So some of you familiar with that. Thank you very much. Let me get back to my presentation. I will still keep this Menti open. Yeah. Okay. Assessment for learning. So I'm going to look at the process of using this definition later on to talk about AI. Yeah. So the assessment for learning is the process of seeking and interpreting evidence. So going to look at the evidence and used by the learners and also the teachers. Then they decide about where they are, what they need, and what's the best way to help the students learning. So I'm not going to talk about scoring. I'm not going to talk about leveling and so on, but it's more on helping students know where they are, where they are going, how can they move up, leveling up their learning. Yeah. So I'm going to look at the strategy for AFL, looking at where they are, where they need to go, how the best to get there, and so on. The strategies usually done by the teacher is using questioning, yeah, effective teachers' feedback, and then I'm going to talk about peer feedback a little, and then student assessment. Yeah, the role of AI a bit later. So most teachers, or including you and me, an English teacher, questioning sometimes used deliberately to find out what the students know, what they understand, what they can do, what they cannot do, and then how to improve later on the next plan. Not questioning to test their ability, but to find out what they know and then use that as a stepping stone to move up to the next level. Yeah, so that's a strategic questioning that can be done by the teacher. The question is, can AI ask strategic questions? There's a question. Effective teachers' feedback. Yeah, it's more giving feedback on what they have achieved, where they can improve. For instance, they can improve grammar, and then which point of the grammar, and so on. So they should provide a specific suggestion. If that's grammar, then you will say okay, you need to improve this in this area. Work on the past tense, and this is the handout, or you can go to this website, and so on and so on. So it's more on what they have achieved and where they need to improve. And then you give also very specific suggestion on how. Yeah, that will be very good if the teacher can do that. The problem is sometimes we have large classes. My question is, can AI help in this case? Yeah. Now let's look at peer feedback. So feedback from friends. Peer can give a feedback more on what they have achieved. Don't ask the student to get feedback, make a correction, but looking at the positive side, what they have achieved, where improvement if necessary. Yeah, so look at the positive side. That's a lot better because that's good also for the peer to do a reflection. Yeah. So it's feedback. It's more on suggestion for improvement, not suggestion and then judging you are in this level. Yeah. So peer feedback can be done by the students. Now, my questions: can AI help or replace peer feedback or feedback from peers? Student self-assessment. This is in a higher level usually, that the students will be responsible for their own learning and their self-monitoring, they do the self-assessment, they have reflection, and so on and so on. Yeah. The question is, can AI help the students to be to do self-assessment? Yeah. Okay, let's have a look at AI and AFL, assessment for learning. Strategic use of questioning. AI, what I experience right now, maybe I'm wrong, that the AI can ask questions, a lot of questions, like chat box, they got a lot of questions, but strategic use of questioning, there's a big question mark. So I consider it at this moment that AI cannot ask strategic use of questioning. They can ask a lot of questions, yes. It's good for the student to practice, yes, but not strategic use of questioning for the purpose of improvement. Yeah. Now, AI development can help teacher giving effective feedback. Yeah, not the whole thing. Yeah, not as clever as the teacher, but there are elements that the AI can take part in helping the students and in helping the teacher in giving feedback. Feedback from the teacher, also feedback, a kind of feedback from the peer. Yeah, and then a lot of self-assessment, of course, the AI can help or facilitate that. Yeah. Let's have a look at some example. AI and reading, for example, or reading and AI. AI can do speech to text or text to speech the other way around. AI can help with the vocabulary. Right now, there is an AI that can summarize a text for the students. Yeah. Now, for example, natural reader, read linguist, and also summary box. That's for AIs. They can help pronouncing words. They can help reading sentences and text. Like read length, they can personalize vocabulary exercise, providing flashcard for the students so that they can improve that. Yeah, and they can translate from one language to another. So if you are reading a text and then they don't understand the text, they can learn on their own. They can get feedback, things that they don't understand, and so on and so on, up to pronouncing word. Yeah, summarizing the text in the web pages, it's not perfect, but you can ask your student to compare the summarizing text from the web. Now, of course, this is not enough. Yeah. If you're teaching reading, then you have to go to this text bias, who are the targeted reader, and so on and so on. That part should be given to the teacher. So the AI will help in a lot of mechanics and the quotation things that the students can do. And then you as the teacher, or we as the teacher, we can concentrate on beyond this mechanics. The bias, whether the reading text is written by somebody for that purpose, target audience, and so on. Yeah, the AI still, I think, working very hard on that part. Yeah. Okay, that's the reading. Let's look at the speaking. There are a lot of AIs that help us speaking, like speech to text. There are a lot of chatbots. If you Googling that chatbots to practice English or to practice other languages, they give a lot of chatbots for free and some are paid. Yeah. Now, can AI give feedback for speaking? Now, if you look at this AIs like Umno, Lightso, Elsa, Orai, yeah, and the kind, there are some more on that. The type of feedback given is instant feedback for voice, text, and picture. And almost all of this AI, this give a facility for recording, so you can listen back, and they can get model, pronunciation models, and so on. Even if you type the text, then they will read it for you in the word, phrases, or sentences. And then some, not all, they recognize and fillers words like that's for public speaking. Keep track of the timing. Giving feedback on clarity and vocal energy. Again, that's mechanic. Yeah? And also, some of this, they provide definition with pictures, examples, sentences, explanations of various words. Again, this mechanics, the AI can give that feedback, type of feedback. But is this whole speech or the whole presentation appropriate for a certain audience? Things like that. Body language, eye contact, tone should be given to the teacher. So AI will help some part of giving feedback, but not all. Working with AI, then the teacher can concentrate more on the things that the AI cannot do, especially if you have a big class. Yeah. Now let's move on to writing. There are two types that AI can do in writing, from my experience, is giving ideas for writing and also proofreading. Yeah. Let's see some of the AIs that's available around. Yeah, this is some, not all. The AI can give feedback or ideas. For example, if you're stuck, I have an essay to write. I don't know what to do. I got a topic. What should I start with? Where should I start? And so on. Then you can use, for example, essay bot or AI writer, for example. Yeah, that will provide a lot of type of paragraph in that certain topics. And also AI for writing, they can, of course, give feedback on spelling and grammar, like we mentioned the name like Grammarly, like Outright, and so on, and giving suggestions. Yeah, they can analyze sentences, whether the sentences is too long, give for power on the sentence clarity, even they can give a paraphrase, yeah, like Quillbot and so on. So that's the type of feedback that it can be given by AIs. Now, AI has a great potential to be utilized in the learning process, especially in assessment for learning. Not again, assessment for learning, not for other purposes. Yeah. So this is the apps that I have looked at through in general and in brief. If you're interested later on in this presentation, if you click this natural reader, for example, then you're going to be directed to the link where you can get download the apps. Yeah. Thank you very much. So if you want to access my presentation, you can go to bit.ly/Jati -BC with this console -Teflon. So, or you can take picture of this, then you can have the access of my slide. Thank you very much. Give it back to you, Chris. Yeah, Chris, is there any questions? Yeah, you still mute, Chris. Kish.
Thank you. Thanks for reminding me about that. Thank you. Yes, just a couple of questions that have come through. So a question from Hiru Adi, asking feedback from students may indicate their understanding about the material that a teacher is discussing. Is it okay to use that as part of or the instrument of the assessment?
As an instrument for the assessment for learning, I think it's okay as long as it's a positive. Yeah, so positive feedback, not negative feedback. Yeah, it's more on where you are now, what can you improve on that side. Yeah, so giving encouragements rather than negative feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. This is a bigger, broader question, perhaps. What are the advantages and disadvantages of learning assessment strategy?
Advantages and disadvantages, I don't know. It's I'm looking at the 4 elements. It's more on how AI can help on that giving feedback. Yeah, that's the strategies that usually the teachers gave in the face-to-face environment. Yeah, and then with the AI, maybe we can combine that. So if asking about disadvantages of learning the strategies, I'm not sure that I can answer that question right now.
I mean, it's a very good discussion topic, I think, probably for another day.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, thank you. All right, and one more question from Valen Taslu. How effective is AI in correcting student errors on grammar?
How effective on grammar? Just for grammar, I think it's very effective. My experience using writing reviser, that's very thorough and effective looking at grammar. But again, just the grammar. The sentences level, they are correct. But when we look at the students writing for paragraph, then the unity and so on, and the coherence, that's the teacher's job to have a look at that.
Thank you. Yep. And just moving on quickly, there's quite a few questions. So the next one is, this is about speaking. How to assess students speaking effectively during remote learning, given limited time for teaching and also given the fact that there are lots of students in each class? Yeah,
that's a very good question. How effective and what can we do? We have to use a lot of again software, but again with the help of the AI. So the AI will keep the record about students' pronunciation and so on and so on. So AI will provide data given to the teacher as far as that's effective. But then giving more further suggestion and so on, that's another problem. Yeah, again, AI is not perfect yet in this level. They are very mechanics, but they can help us a lot. Yeah, so we have to try it and try to experiment and get used to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a silver bullet yet, is it? It's for everything, but as you say, it's a handy tool to support everything. Thank you very much, Bapak Jati. That's been really great.
Thank you.
questions, if you have them, please mention them in the chat. We'll try and come back to them later. We'll move on, if that's okay. So the next speaker I would like to introduce, we have Will Bayliss, and Will is one of the British Council's Assessment Solutions Consultant in East Asia, and he's based in China. Today he's going to be talking about practical online tools and strategies for remote formative assessment. So Will, over to you, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, welcome. And thanks for joining us today for this symposium on English language assessment. And also thanks to Kishore for his hosting today. And thanks to Dr. Jati for that really insightful presentation. I'd just like to say before I start, if you hear really loud construction noises during my presentation, it's because they're building the metro next door. So I apologize for that in advance. Before we start, I'd like to tell you some information about myself. My name is William Bayliss, and as Kishore said, I work for the British Council's East Asia Assessment Solutions team based in Shanghai, China. I have a master's degree in applied linguistics from Edinburgh University. Before joining the British Council, I worked as an English teacher and then as academic manager at Chinese English training school here in Kunming, China. Prior to that, I worked in the outdoor education and adventure travel industry, and my office is based in Chongqing, China. Here's a quick summary of what I would like to talk about today. First, I'm going to...
Well, sorry to interrupt. We can't see your full slide. We see about 70% of it maybe, but we're missing the right hand side. That's perfect. That's it. Great.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
No.
Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about assessment in the age of COVID, essentially the implications of COVID on the way that we teach and the way that we assess. I'm going to start with some assessment fundamentals so we can understand which part of assessment I'm talking about. I'm going to talk about using online surveys to assess learning outcomes. I'm going to talk about using video to assess learning outcomes. I'm going to talk about text-based chat to assess learning outcomes. Then I'm going to share some resources with you, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Anyone who has lived through 2020 knows about COVID. In the recent past, there has been a slow move towards remote rather than face-to-face teaching. This has been massively accelerated by COVID and has become for many the new normal. So the question is, and the question I'd like us to think about today, how can we translate the skills and processes that we use as teachers in the classroom to web-based teaching? And in particular, how can we deliver class-based assessments online? So the aims of the presentation today are to answer this question and to highlight how online assessment is nowadays, because of mobile phones, it's accessible to anyone with a smartphone and internet access. And finally, to empower teachers to use technology creatively to highlight and fulfill students' needs. What technology do teachers need for online assessment? Well, I decided to limit the scope of this workshop to native functionality of smartphones with an internet connection. The reason for this is it's the most widely available technology for most people in the world. According to Statista.com, there are 4.57 billion unique mobile users in the world in 2020. I think this is about as close as we can get to ubiquitous technology. That is technology that everybody has access to. The main exceptions for this are in schools, actually, and that's because many schools don't allow mobile phones in the classroom. However, today we're talking about remote teaching, not classroom-based teaching. So I hope this isn't an issue. In terms of my assumptions about you guys as my audience, I'm assuming that everyone taking part today and their students have access to a smartphone. I'm assuming if you manage to log into this, you have the technological skills and most likely have a smartphone. And I'm also assuming that the majority of you are TEFL and ESL teachers. If you're not an English teacher, the theory and the practical examples that I'm going to talk about today are easily transferable to teachers of other subjects. But just to let you know, the examples used today will be TEFL and ESL focused. Now I'd like to talk about some assessment, language assessment fundamentals. The first question then would be, what is language assessment? Let's start with a broad definition, this one coming from Bachman and Palmer. Language assessment is used to make inferences about an individual's capability to perform future tasks or jobs that require the use of language. Or it's used to make inferences about an individual's ability to use language in future tasks or jobs. There's a subtle distinction between those two things, but I think it's an important distinction to make. You're either focusing first on the language and secondly on how well someone can perform a role, or you are focusing on how well they can perform a role with language being secondary. Language assessment is also used to make decisions about test takers, about teachers, about programs. These decisions are made by a variety of stakeholders, test takers, teachers, administrators, employers, school boards, state boards of education, even boards of directors for companies. The key takeaways from this slide are, we're talking about inferences that language assessment gives us. We're talking about decisions that language assessment informs. There are various forms of assessment with a variety of labels. As you can see, I've put a handful of them here on this slide. Discussion of all of them is beyond the scope of today's workshop. Well, what I'd like you to do today is guide you from a wide understanding of assessment to a specific type of assessment, which I hope is the main focus of today's presentation. To do so, there are some key distinctions that I would like to make. Firstly, between what is termed formative and what is termed summative assessment. And then between what is termed high stakes and what is termed low stakes decisions or tests. Let's have a look at these in turn. Let's talk about high and low stakes decisions first. The key difference are those of impact, the impact of the decision, and the ease with which the decision can be reversed. The easiest way to describe this is through some examples. So, for example, if we're talking about high stakes, a job interview involves high stakes decisions. If an applicant performs poorly on a job interview because of her nervousness or lack of specific preparation, she may not be offered the job, even though she's well qualified for it. Once the job role is filled, there may not be another job opening for a long time. And if there are limited job opportunities, this has a major impact on her life. So the impact is big and it's very hard to reverse. If there are no jobs, she can't get a job. In terms of low stakes decisions, an example is a teacher using a test to diagnose strengths and weaknesses. Why would they do this? Well, they want to find out how well a student is doing so that they can assign them activities that are the right difficulty for their level. If the teacher gets this wrong and thinks, oh, this student is better than they actually are, and they give them some work that's too hard, well, it's quite easy for them to give them some different materials that are easy for them. So they make a decision, maybe the decision's wrong. It's very easy for them to change what they did and easily correct and resolve. Now let's look at formative and summative assessment. A great example of the distinction between formative and summative tests is the tasting of food by a chef and by a guest or by a customer. The chef tasting the food is assessing formatively, is doing a formative assessment. The chef can use the insight gained from the tasting to make decisions about changing the recipe, changing the way that they cook the soup. They can use the information, they can use the data that they've gained to make a change. However, if a guest is tasting the soup, this is summative. The guest makes the final decision. There is very little that the chef can do once the guest has made their decision. Or if the guest doesn't like the soup, there's very little that they can do. Maybe they could add some salt, maybe they could complain, though complaining is usually best avoided unless the soup is completely inedible. So in specific language assessment terms, when we're talking about formative and summative assessment, formative assessment is assessment for learning, which Dr. Jatti talked about in his previous presentation. The primary goal of this form of assessment is to support learning. It helps teachers to reconfigure the pedagogy, reconfigure the way that they teach, and it allows students to reconfigure the way that they study so that they can improve, fulfilling the students' needs. The secondary goal is to assess competence. Usually, formative assessment is used for making low stakes decisions. Summative assessment. This is the assessment of learning. These are the kinds of tests that people think of when you say tests. Lots of people in a big hall in silence, writing down all of the answers that they can think of in a set amount of time. The primary goal of these kinds of tests is to document competence. For example, the IELTS test will give you a certificate, and that certificate will be your key to entry to an institution or a country. The secondary goal is to support learning. So summative assessment isn't that useful to help teachers reconfigure the way that they teach or help students change their study habits. Usually summative assessments are used for medium to high stakes decisions. Now, something that is very important to stress is that a test in itself is not summative, formative, or any other type of test. It depends entirely on how the test is used, rather than being qualities that are inherent in the assessment design. For example, the IELTS test. Usually when we talk about IELTS, people think of a summative test that gives you a document that gives you access to certain things. However, more recently, the British Council have started using IELTS or the IELTS test setup for a formative assessment product called Speak Up. And what happens in Speak Up is assessment experts use the test format of IELTS to give someone essentially a mock test. And then they use the insights gained from the candidate, from the user performance, and then they give feedback which aids improvement. And that's the key. It's all about informing reconfiguration of either the teacher, the way the teacher teaches, or for the student, the way that they study. What then would I like to talk about today? Well, today I would like to talk about formative, low stakes assessment processes. Why? Well, at the start of the session, I explained that my goal was to empower teachers. Well, a formative assessment supports learning first, assesses competence second. It's a low stakes process, so this means that decisions are easily reversed and have relatively minor impact. Whereas if a teacher uses ranking summative assessments, they're not really that well suited to helping teachers improve. Summative tests are often taken at the end of a school year, and the results can arrive much later, which means that the opportunity for intervention from the teacher to try and help the student, or for the student to gain the feedback and try and change the way that they study, is over. And also the results often arrive in a format that isn't really that helpful for giving fine-grained feedback. If you are an IELTS examiner and you have a deep understanding of the way that IELTS is rated, then an IELTS score number, say an IELTS 7, has a lot of meaning. But to people who aren't aware of all of the criteria that goes into that number, it doesn't really give you a huge amount of information. It's just a number between 1 and 9 on a competence scale. So it's not really that useful. Whereas formative low stakes assessment, well, it's ideal to help students collect, teachers and students collect insights in class to reconfigure future classes, tasks, or assignments. What then is an example of formative assessment? Well, the good news is that teachers are already doing this in terms of classroom-based micro assessments. So what is the aim of a micro assessment? Well, in essence, a micro assessment prompts students to mimic effective students' learning behaviors. These are the kinds of things that strong, effective students do all the time. They take corrective action. They save and review assignments and tests. They review errors and areas of weakness. They rework problems. They inform themselves with course books and wider materials, and they discuss further issues with their teachers, their peers, and they self-reflect. What does this look like in the classroom? What do micro assessments look like? Well, they're things that teachers do all the time. So for example, when you are teaching a class, you might introduce some kind of language point, and then you would do a spot check. You would ask concept check questions to the students to see whether or not the students understand. Also, you have instruction check questions. You ask students structured questions to make sure that they understand what they're supposed to be doing in a task. We use startup prompts to review students' homework. At the beginning of a class, you might put up, say, half sentences that cover a language point from the previous class. Why do we do this? Well, the class that we're teaching might require that language as a foundation for the language point that you want to move on to. So if the students don't understand it and it needs to be reviewed more, this needs to be done before you move on to the next part of the class. Otherwise, there will be a problem. We talk to parents. Parents are a fantastic source of information and data about how the students are doing. If a parent's telling you that their son or daughter is taking I don't know, 3 hours to do homework that should take 25 minutes, then that's a pretty good indication that something needs to change. We use pop quizzes, mini tests. We talk with students during small group work. There was a question earlier asking, how do I deal with teaching huge classes? Well, one way of doing it is to break the students into small groups and then listen in to those groups so that you can make a judgment about how people are doing rather than trying to manage the whole group at once. We probe responses. This is what Dr. Jati was talking about earlier in terms of questioning. How do you question? How do you probe those questions to find out more? And then finally, very rough but very useful tool is, thumbs up, thumbs side, thumbs down. Probably not very good for checking concepts, because if you say, do you understand? And everyone says, yeah, I understand. That doesn't mean that they understand. That just means that they're mimicking you, sticking your thumb up. But this is very useful for, a classroom activity. You give people 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, you say, thumbs up, side down. Do you want more time or not? It's a good way of gauging what's going on in the class. Well, this list is by no way exhaustive, and guidance on these activities fills volumes of teachers' manuals. The point is that teachers in the classroom are constantly using tasks, activities, prompts, games to elicit language from our students. And from that language, we gain insights about how the students are doing. What then do we do with this data? What do we do with it once we have collected it? Well, this is where what I'm terming tagging, binning, and clustering data come in. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's say, let's say a teacher has students working on a productive task in small groups. By moving between the groups, monitoring and asking them questions, she collects insights about the students' performance and tags them. Well, what do I mean by tag? Well, as you can see on the slide, you can tag the students' understanding or use of the language point weak, proficient, or advanced. And then what we can do is tag or bin that information. So what do I mean by that? Well, you think of all the students you've got and then you put the students into each of those bins. The results of this process can either be eyeballed, and what I mean by that is you don't formally write it down, but you just get a gauge. You think, oh, I think maybe more than half of the students didn't get it. So that's an issue. Or if you've got a notepad, you can actually go through each of the individual students and then mark them down, make a small graph. And then this gives you a very clear indication of how each individual student and how the class is performing. So as you can see on the slide, yeah, we've got weak, proficient, advanced. And the yellow boxes, they represent how many students in the class I put in each of the bins. So as we can see here, you've got lots of weak students, a couple of proficient students, and very, very few advanced students. So this is a very powerful indicator for the teacher, because the teacher can obviously see that something is wrong here. But it could be one of two things, because this tells you, firstly, how the class as a whole is performing, not well, but it also tells you how well the task is performing. Well, the better you know the task, so the more times you've used that task, the better the indication of student performance. Because if you know the task works really well, usually, then you have a pretty good indication that the students aren't doing so well. But also, the other way around, the better you know the students, the better the indication of task performance. Because if, say, you know that this class is really strong and you can see that most of the students did poorly in the task, then you think to yourself, actually, maybe this isn't a very good measure of how the students are doing. But this is a very good indication, because we can talk about task performance. You know, was the task too easy? Was it too hard? Was the focus of the task correct? Did the students perform as we expected? And then in terms of student performance, are all the students now proficient in the goal content? Will I need to review the material again? As I said before, can the teacher move on to a more complex level that requires this content as a foundation? The most important thing to note about this is this process only works well if we have a clear understanding of the class, task, or assignment aims. Teachers need to have a clear understanding of what their students should know, what they should understand, and what they should be able to do after a given segment of learning. I will refer to this as aims for the remainder of the presentation. This creates a point of reference, much like the lighthouse in this slide, for classroom micro assessments. Formative assessment can be delivered in any format that a teacher can think of, as long as its goal is to measure these aims. This informs the questions a teacher asks themselves whilst they are micro-assessing, and the tags and bins that insights are organised by. Feedback then takes the form of a dialogue between the teacher and the student, students and their peers, and even student self-reflection, highlighting skills and knowledge gaps so that they can improve next time. Also, the results of the process highlights future student needs, informs clear curriculum decisions that focus on what matters most. This can be illustrated in a diagram like this one, a process that we can work through as teachers. We think to ourselves, what are the aims? We think to ourselves, what is a strategy I can use to micro-assess the students so that I can elicit language that demonstrates these aims? I tag and bin those insights. Then I take those insights and I think about how that affects the student needs. What do the student needs? And I can also think, well, actually, maybe I could do this differently next time. Maybe there's a better way of doing this. And once I have my data, I use that to reconfigure the pedagogy, reconfigure the way that I teach, and reconfigure the way that I micro-assess. And then we start again, and we keep going round in this cycle. The more we do this, then the better we get at it. Let's talk about online assessment. As we have discussed, an integral part of any curriculum and a teacher's practice is micro-assessment of students in the classroom. As I stated earlier, COVID has accelerated the move towards online rather than face-to-face classrooms. I want to demonstrate some very simple and widely available online tools that allow teachers to use these micro-assessments via smartphone in the remote online classroom. The three tools are online survey software like Microsoft Forms and Survey Monkey, video recorders. Every mobile phone has these. These two icons are the default Google and Apple camera apps that you get on phones. And then finally, text and voice chat. I think the two most widely used are WhatsApp, which is basically most of the world, and then WeChat, which is the China-based one. This isn't a prescriptive list. The important thing is the functionality, being able to deliver an online questionnaire, being able to video, and being able to chat online. Let's have a look at each of these in turn. First, let's have a look at online surveys. The most obvious use for these web apps, sites such as SurveyMonkey and Microsoft Forms, is for creating online versions of pop quizzes and mini tests that teachers often deploy in the classroom. The great thing about digital versus paper tests of this kind is the ease of sharing and marking these tests. I was a teacher for many years. I know the pain and misery that's caused by having a huge stack of these papers that you need to mark. Microsoft Forms has functionality where basically as soon as the last person has submitted their form, you get the data is instantly assessed, and you get graphs and you get tables that demonstrate how the class is performing. The data can also be exported to an Excel file for further analysis or storage. So, I mean, that's great functionality. The quizzes can vary from very simple polls, which actually Dr. Jati demonstrated with menti.com. That looks like a fantastic way of doing exactly this. You want to know how the class is doing. You have a very short poll. You send it to all of your class fill it out, and then you get instant feedback showing you how well the class is doing. That's a really, really fantastic tool. Also, these online tools can be used in much more creative ways. How? Well, the key element of an online survey is that it asks questions. Well, if the aim of the class is to teach English question forms, why not have the students make their own surveys using the web apps and have them send the survey, say, to 10 of their classmates, and of course, you as a teacher. An extension might even be to have the students analyze the results of their surveys themselves. But for you, the teacher, because your aim is question forms, look at the questions that your students have written, and you very quickly get a feel for how well the students are forming questions, noting, common errors and misconceptions. Always remember, though, to make sure that activity is in whatever form it takes to address the aims of the class. So we always start with the aims. What is it we want the students to know? What is it we want them to understand? And what is it we want them to be able to do? And then we form the strategy, the assessment strategy around that. Next, let's talk about using video to assess learning. Well, the most obvious use for video is setting up a group chat with students, group video chat, as a class or in smaller groups. Some platforms like Zoom allow both. This is fantastic functionality. You have 100 people in a webinar. You can click a button and it splits the 100 into groups of 6, say. People can talk to their newfound friends in these small groups, and the teacher, the person running the webinar, can drop into each of those sessions and have a listen to it. This allows classroom-like interaction with students, or lecture-like interactions similar to our webinar right now. From my experience, the smaller the group, the easier the interaction is. Like, for example, today, it would be very, very difficult for me to talk to each of you individually to, if you were my English student, say, to gauge how well your English is. But if it was a small group of, I don't know, even like 10, it would be fine. It would be a chat, and I could ask people questions individually to see how it's going. Beyond that, the video camera on our phones is just that. It's a video camera, which, as we know from watching movies, is a very, very creative tool. The process of making short films can be very fun and rewarding. Every Android and Apple mobile phone has the functionality to record videos, and there are endless apps that can be downloaded that have very wide functionality for video editing, etc. So how can we use this functionality to gain insight into student performance? Well, as ever, what are the aims? Have those aims in mind. What is it I want my students to know, understand? What do I want them to be able to do? Then let's say the aim of the class is reported speech as a construction. Well, we could ask all of our students to interview a friend, possibly using one of the survey web apps, and then film themselves pretending to be a news presenter. So pretend that their pencil was a microphone and talk into the camera and say, well, describe what their friend said or describe what their friend did. Well, depending on the class dynamics, the students could either share these videos on a class chat so that everyone can see the videos, or they can just send these videos to the teacher directly. Watching these videos would be very similar experience for the teacher to walking around a classroom, monitoring the students doing a productive class, and similar insights for the teacher could be gained. Students can be encouraged to watch each other's videos, giving feedback, but we have to be very careful with this because you don't want people to be upset. So we need to give students some guidance, some training, and some experience on how to give effective, useful, constructive feedback rather than just telling each other they hate each other's videos or whatever, which would obviously cause problems. Another possibility is encouraging students to make video diaries. These can be monitored by the teacher. This is a fantastic tool for seeing student improvement, both for the teacher and for the student themselves. They can look back through their video diary and look at how good their English was, say, 6 months before, and then look at it now. This would be very encouraging for them. As I've said, as long as the activity that you come up with using this video technology is focused on the aims, then your imagination is the only limit of what you can come up with. So finally, let's talk about using text-based voice chat to assess learning outcomes. Nowadays, so many people use this functionality using chat on their mobile phones. It's arguably as authentic as face-to-face communication. You know, seemingly half the world do it every day. For that reason, I don't need to describe the basics of, you know, how we use chat. But there are a few points that I'd like to make. So firstly, class and group discussions. The great thing about mobile chat is the wide variety of media that can be brought in. Most software is able to support words, pictures, audio, video, videos made by the person themselves or professionally made videos, links to anything on the internet, and various other applications, of which there are too many to mention. The text chat then can be used as a forum to discuss a prompt, a question that's posted by the teacher. The teacher thinks, what do I want the students to talk about so that I can assess my learning aims? Well, they put a prompt on the chat room, and then they give the students a specification. For example, they say you have to write a summary of an article, an online article. It needs to be 50 words long, and you need to include a picture that represents how you felt about the article. This is very, very limited, but you could extend this to include sharing results to an online survey, sharing a short video they made, sharing relevant articles, or anything else that they've found online. One application I really like is having the class choose from a series of flashcards, stickers, emojis, you know, the smiley faces, as you can see on the slide, and having the class agree to the meanings of these emojis. So if you are doing an online class and you want to gauge, you know, whether or not people need a break, whether or not they're tired, how their motivation is, you just say to them, you know, everybody share one of these pictures, one of these flashcards, and then the teacher gets an indication of how people are doing. One thing that is fantastic about text text-based classes rather than face-to-face classes is what happens after the class. Because when you have the text history after the class, it's possible for the teacher to go back through the whole class and they can make judgments about individual students' levels of involvement, participation, accuracy, comprehension. Actually, this is much easier to judge online than it is in a live classroom. You could use like a Zoom video camera to video all of your classes and watch them back afterwards, but that would be very, very laborious. Whereas with this, it's very, very easy. So it's easier to judge how students are doing. So in conclusion, teachers are persistently assessing in the classroom. By understanding this process and its elements, we can improve the effectiveness of our classes. We can help our students to improve. COVID has accelerated the move from face-to-face to online teaching, and mobile phones with internet are becoming the norm. This is an opportunity for us to be creative. Just because we're not in the classroom doesn't mean we can't gain similar insights to face-to-face teaching. These simple tools that I've talked about today have limitless potential for creative, fun, and insightful strategies for assessing students. I would encourage you to come up with and share your own methods for using online tools like these or others. And as I said, online tools give us some bonus functionality, like automatic marking of tests. What a wonderful thing that is. And then also the ability to review language and ideas shared in groups that are not possible in the live classroom. Just before I finish, I'd like to share this resource with you. This is a formative assessment. What is the website called? The website is called Wakelet. This is a link to a Wakelet site that is full of lots and lots of links of things related to formative assessment, related to online assessment. Here is my bibliography. If anyone would like to take a photograph of this. One of the books, the fourth one down, Shearer on formative assessment, I would definitely recommend to anyone who's interested in this as a topic. It is very inspirational and has lots of very useful tools in it. That's it from me. Does anyone have any questions?
I will. Thanks very much. That was great. So many practical ideas there, and you've raised a lot of questions actually. So a bit of a challenge for me to sift through them and choose them. Start with. So this was a question from Giulianto. He asks, what classroom activities could be used to accommodate your concept of tagging, cluster, and bin in online classes?
I think pretty much any online activity. I think the most important thing with any activity, as I said before, the most important thing is what is the language aim? And then the second thing is, what do you want to know? Do you want to know something about every one of your students, or do you just want to get a general idea of how your students are doing? So for example, the activity that I talked about where you get your students to firstly interview each other so that they can write down some information about what someone else said. And then you get them to make their own little video of pretending to be a news anchor talking about what the other person said. So what you would be able to do in terms of the tagging is watch each of those videos. And as you watch each of those videos, you think to yourself, is this person able to use reported speech? And it will be very clear whether or not they're able to use it. And then, as I said, you make your little graph whilst you're going through all of the students. And then when you get to the end, you think to yourself, okay, 60% of the students in my class are, proficient users of reported speech. Is that enough? Do I need to go back and help the other 40% that didn't get it to make sure that they have those skills moving forward in the classes?
Thanks, Will. Yeah, and then actually building on from that, it was a great idea, I think, talking about, video and all those video related exercises. So there was a question from Yulia, and thinking about low bandwidth related speaking exercises, bearing in mind, students may have limits in terms of data that they may be able to access. How could we encourage students to do formative or summative exercises based on speaking, but as I say, with limited bandwidth or limited data?
I would say don't use video, use audio instead, because that's the fantastic thing with the chat, because those chats work with so many different forms of data. If you do have low data, then speech is much.
Have we lost Will? What happened there? Suggestion on that last question, actually. So there's a tool that I've used, which again is, as Will says, it's audio only. It's not video. It's online and it's free. It's called Vocaroo. VOCAROO. And it's a great tool that you can use for instant and immediate audio recordings, and really easy to use, and it instantly send them via email, for instance, to a teacher, for instance. So that's one tool that I would definitely recommend. Okay, I'm afraid I think we may have lost Will, but we will try and come back to him if we can. I know there were plenty of questions actually, and some really good questions, so we will try and come back. In the meantime, if we can, we will proceed to the next speaker. So we're very lucky to have Nur Arifa Drajati. She's from the Universitas 11 Maret, and she will be talking to us today about the challenges and the opportunities that the pandemic has brought in terms of assessing learning. So Ibu Nur, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Kis. I'm Nur Arifa Drajati from Universitas 11 Maret. Would like to share my experience about how to assessing our students in the COVID period. Okay, I would like to share the slides. Okay, good day, everyone. So today I would like to share about my experience. Maybe this is just simple because I'm still learning also how to cope with this kind of conditions. Yep. This is the current challenges in online or computerized in assessment during COVID. We have to ensure that our assessment are valid and reliable. And the second one is recognizing and accepting that instance of academic dishonesty are on the side. And the third one is learning to design assessment and test tasks that minimize or mitigate or even eliminate cheating. Then the opportunities, we have time for learning, and sometimes this is such kind of a force ourselves to learn and assessing the courses in a variety ways. And the second one is we have trying to raising the honesty awareness. And the third one is learning how to use and create technology tools for assessment, if it is possible. Then this is what I did and what I'm doing now in consider before doing the assessment. First is trying to learn again the instructional needs of the assessment of my students, and then creating the activities that's suitable for them. The third one is what is the learning goals? What is the competence that the students have to have, though in these situations? And the last one is talking about the process-based assessment and product-based assessment. So this is the things that I consider before doing the assessment. The other things is talking about the technological considerations. First is about cost and impact. And the second one, the accessibility, user-friendliness, learning environment, and technological affordance. We know that in these situations, we have a lot of or some problems that maybe this is related to the technological things. Yeah, so this is the things that we have to consider because not all of the students have this kind of are able to connect and connected each other. So related to the technological tools, this is in the university, but I'm sure that it can be used also in high school, and also and it could be used in elementary also. I use LMS for the teaching and assessing. They can send the assessment document to LMS. And also I use Google Drive and Google Docs because most of the assessment are writings. And the third one, I have a project that use some applications. So this is just examples. The courses that I teach last semester. I teach micro teaching, and then the second one, systemic functional linguistic for language educations, and the third one is academic writing. So micro teaching needs to practice. After having lesson plan, creating lesson plan, then the students usually practice in teaching, and then we, the lecturer, give a feedback. And also there's such kind of a feedback from the peer from their colleague. But in COVID pandemic, there is this kind of a problem because we can see each other, we can have direct feedback. So this is what we did last year. So we have a TPAC framework. So the students creating lesson plan using a TPAC framework, and we have LMS. We use Moodle. Yeah, we have Moodle. This is from university requirements, and they record their teaching practice using screencast-o-matic and send to YouTube. So everyone can see how to practice in teaching using this kind of framework. And the other things is the students also can make use of the other applications. So before having this kind of practice, the students also have discussions each other how to create lesson creatively. And this is the assessment for the micro teaching, in the micro teaching course, designing a lesson plan and then recording the teaching process. So this is in SPADA, in Moodle. So all of the documents are recorded in the LMS. And this is we have to learn how to practice some tools. Yeah. And this is sharing ideas and then the experience, students' experience in using some tools. And if they have such kind of difficulties, they can also ask the teachers and also the other friends. Okay, then all of the documents are submitted in LMS. And the second one, this is talking about academic writing. So I create a pair works. So it is not individual works because we see because of the COVID-19, it also give pressure for the students. It is not only talk about the academic one, but also pressure from parents, from the environment. So to make it have a lower pressure, I make it the assessment in pair works. So having a peer review, having a peer discussions between the students and also the teachers. And the tools is using Google Drives and also Google Docs for academic writing. So I use this because I think Google Docs is the simple way, and also it only needs low connection of internet, and also they can do offline when there's no internet uh, that connect directly at that time. So I make it in a group, so I can see whether the students do, and also we can give comments, and also we can give feedback. So this is a process. So we can see that there's such kind of Google Docs in the applications of the our Gmail. Yeah. So we can see that each the students have respond to the writing that becoming their responsibility to give feedback and also to make it the writing better and better. And the third one is about systemic functional linguistic for language educations. This is for master students. I do the project for this course. So this is a big group because each group consists of 8 to 9 students. Yeah, this is I just think that this is not a simple work. So they did in a group of students. So the students using this kind of applications, they can work from home using CorelDRAW, Photoshop, YouTube, and StoryJumper. So this is the project that they did. So there's a product for this course based on the concept of POA, production-oriented approach, that the assessment of the product consists of this concept. So there's how to motivate the students, and then how to enable the students, and then how to assess the students. Then this is the rubric that I use. I take it from Ruby Star. We can use it online and create based on our choice. So there are a lot of choices, and we can use Ruby Star for having the rubrics. So, and also we can create by ourselves of the categories. Then my students would like to share about how their feelings in doing the project. So Mas Adi Irma Suryadi, would you please to share about your experience?
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. I'm Adi Irma Suryadi from Universitas 11 Maret. In this good occasion, I would like to share my experience about classroom assessment during COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm sorry, there is no noise sound. Yeah. Next slide, please, ma'am. Okay. In the previous semester, we created a digital story. The title is Roro Jonggrang. Roro Jonggrang is popular folk tales from Central Java, Indonesia. It tells about historical background of Prambanan Temple. Next slide, please, ma'am. Yeah, before we created the story, firstly we learned a systemic functional linguistic theory about meaning making based on three components: additional meaning or veiled, what's going on the text, how text construct particular representation of people, events, or ideas. And the second one is interpersonal meaning or tenor, how language in text creates a particular relationship between writer and reader, express judgment or attitude of the writer. And the third one is textual meaning or mode, how message is organized, for example, to narrate, to describe, to inform, and so on. And the second one is we analyze the story. In this case, is a video, not only on linguistic or verbal, such as additional, interpersonal, and textual, but also non-linguistic or visual, such as pictures, audios, or music, gestures, and so on. And then the last one is creating a story. We created a meaning making a digital story. Next slide, please. Yeah. When we created a story, we maximize the teamwork. Actually, we divided our group members into three small teams. There was a story team, picture or illustration team, and quiz team. Before we collaborate in Story Jumper, we did online discussion by using Skype. We developed our story in Google Docs. So we type or develop our story while doing online discussion. And then we design the layout of our story in Story Jumper. Actually, a Story Jumper allowed us to collaborate in developing a digital story by online. So we could create digital story easily, even though our group members in different places. During this project, we have to report the progress of our project on LMS or in SPADA UNS. After finishing our story, there was a peer review. We got reviews not only from Indonesian students, but also from Hong Kong. So we got reviews from the students of Education University of Hong Kong, and from our target readers from Indonesian senior high school students. And then we revise our story based on reviews or suggestions that we got from the readers. Here the example of reviews from the student from the Hong Kong. Yeah, I think that's all from me. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Masadi, for sharing the experience in doing the assessment. Yeah, so this is the experience of the students in doing the assessment when during COVID, because it is difficult. It is not only difficult for the students, but also for the teachers in considering the tools and then how to assess the students in remote classrooms. Yeah. So maybe if there are some questions or comments related to this experience, welcome to the questions. Okay, thank you, Keith. Maybe we have some discussions with the participants.
Yes, thank you very much, both of you. Thank you. That was really interesting. We've got a lot of questions actually, so we have time, I think, for a short panel discussion. I'd like to start with you, Ibn, if we could. So,
Yes.
a question from Arta Sihan, Batam.
Yeah.
She asks about, he or she asks about creating highly motivating online classes in English language. Any advice on how to create highly motivating online classes on English language, and especially in the context maybe where the students are not necessarily from an English department?
Yeah. Okay. So it is a little difficult, but I think we can start with giving a challenge for the students in doing the task and the assessment. So we have such kind of negotiations between teachers and students how to do the assessment. Sometimes that I have a conversation. Is it too hard? Is it too difficult for you to do this? And then is there any difficulties in doing this kind of assessment? Though in having online, I think it is more difficult because we don't know the real problem that faced by the students. We see that this is the real one that I face when I teach and also assess the students in this pandemic. That the students should go to another place in having conversations with the teachers. So we have to, as the teachers, we should know how the students solve this kind of problem. Moreover, when the students have some problems related to the connectivity, related to the technical problem, and also maybe they also have a problem related to the concept that they don't understand. So we have a lot of, sometimes that we have to challenge the students how to do this and that, the task, but at the same time we have to negotiate. Sometimes if it is so difficult, too difficult for the students, we make it lower. Yeah. And the other things that maybe it is a very impressive, and it is a surprise for me that though the students have the same experience in doing the assessment in the COVID pandemic, they can have great works. Yeah, for example, doing the teamwork and also having connections with the other students from other countries. So they are happy, and sometimes they don't feel that they are in the assessment. Yeah, but at the same time, they have the competence. It is not only talk about the concept, but also in communicating with other students from other countries that they never met before and they never communicate before. So it is challenge, but also the students doesn't have pressure to have this kind of communications. Yeah, maybe this is my questions, my answer about.
Thank you very much. Now, and I think you're right as well. Obviously, we have lots of challenges nowadays, but equally, as you say, lots of opportunities as well, and opportunities to put students in new learning experiences and learning situations, just as you say. And again, I guess another question on a similar theme. This is Jessica. Do you think they've used video for assessment, for speaking assessment, but students mostly read when they do that? the students aren't speaking spontaneously. How can we encourage students to speak and air their thoughts more spontaneously? Any suggestions on that?
Okay, I have the experience. This is also in a pandemic, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this is a cross-culture understanding. But this is not speaking directly. This is a written communications. So I try to make a connections with the other students from other countries, and the students should communicate with them, with the other students, but in chat, yeah, in chat. So they can submit the chat into my they have to record all of the chat and submit it to me. So the students actually, it is not communicate directly, but they can use chat for communicating with others. We can see that this is the person from other countries, because we use the applications as kind of bottle, and then other tools that we can use for, this is a social media. So it is this is authentic assessment, because the students have a potential to communicate with other people from that they never met before. So this is my experience in having the assessment for in a course culture understanding. But the other case is in Mas Adi class, that's a several classroom, they communicate with other students. So they have two ways communications and interactions between Universitas 11 Maret students and also Education University of Hong Kong students. So they can communicate each other. So we can see that this is a speaking assessment. Yeah. So maybe the other things is we can use artificial intelligence, such kind of speech to text. Yeah, but this is only just check the pronunciations, and also maybe this is related to check whether this is in context or not. Yeah, so we can use some tools to check the speaking.
Great, thank you, Ibnu. Yes, some great suggestions there, and as you say, more opportunities and more relevant opportunities as the context that we're all.
Yes.
Okay, we have a short panel discussion, so can I invite all the presenters to just turn on their cameras again, and I have a couple of questions for you. If I can start with Pak Jati, please. So this was a question from Siamshia, and the question is around how to assess the reliability of online assessment tools.
How to assess the reliability of the assessment tools? Honestly, I cannot answer that questions, but then we have to look at it the other way. When we need assessments for learning, then there are a lot of tools. But then how reliable? Again, the AI got the limitations that they will only assess or help or giving feedback or provide prompt to whatsoever in a mechanic way. So based on the input. So how reliable for assessment for learning? I think it's pretty broad, and in this context, I cannot give a clear answer. Maybe some will help me giving the ideas. Back to you, Chris.
Sure. I mean, as you say, I think perhaps in some contexts, reliability may not be that important, actually. If it's assessment for learning, reliability is a higher priority. It's more the opportunity, maybe, the experience and the feedback. Yeah, fair enough. Will, a question for you, if we may. This is a question from Michigan State University, no less, apparently. In terms of multimodality in assessing students, which would you suggest is more advantageous, asynchronous or synchronous activity?
Wow, that's a very complicated question. I think what they're asking is, do you just test once? Or do you test many times and then see whether or not there are differences between each time that you test? I think that's what they're asking. I apologize if it's not. If that's not what you're asking, please, can you leave your details and I will do some research into it and I will get back to you. But if that is what you mean, I would say, well, it always depends on what is it that you want to know. And this kind of speaks to the previous question as well, that was talking about reliability. What is it that you want to test in your students? If you are doing assessment for learning, so you just want to know how well a class are doing on a specific language point, so you can steer your next class to make sure that you are helping the students in what they need help with, then it's fine to just do a one-off test. But if you want to judge how well your students are doing over a long period of time, then you would probably want to do many tests so that you can see how the students are doing over time.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, I think you're on the right lines. I think maybe as well what this question is about is the relative pros and cons of, say, live interactive activities such as an online class and in comparison to, say, other activity where students may not be engaging at the same time. So for example, a forum discussion where they'll be engaging, but they'll be doing it at different times. So you've got those two different types of activities, live and say, you know, the opposite, I suppose. But both of them are interactive in different ways.
Sure. And well, it all comes down to the aims. It all comes down to what is it that you want to find out. And so when you're testing, so say you want to test how well the students can speak off the cuff, talking about a given subject. Well, the thing that you want to be testing them on is their ability to speak without having prepared what they're speaking. So what you don't want to do is put them in a situation where they have to think of new words or they have to use new grammar constructs or things like that, because all you're doing there is asking them to do too many things at once. So if you, going back to what you were saying about having lots of people talking together in a video chat, if you just want to know whether or not the students are using a series of words that you taught in a previous class, then it would be absolutely fine to just jot down when students are using those words, and then you can see that some of the students are using them and some of the students aren't.
Okay, great, thanks, Will. Thank you very much. And then Ivanur, if I could put this question to you, please. And this is a we've had a number of questions on a very similar theme. This one is specifically from Melita Saripurba from Bandung, and the question relates to how teachers can ensure that the students themselves are doing the online assessments, given that teachers can't control, you know, where the students are doing these activities, maybe who they're sitting alongside, because there is always that possibility that students may perhaps, you know, take advantage of the situation on a specific assignment. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, okay, thank you for the questions. Yeah, it is big questions, and I think it is a good idea for having research on this field, because I think that this is also difficult, you know, for make sure that the students do by themselves. But in these situations, I think that we have to create such kind of a belief to our students. Yeah, we have to make sure that everyone can do this and understand about the concept and then the task clearly. And I think it needs process to make it in rising the honesty and then trying to minimize the cheating. So why I choose Google Docs and also Google Drive. And one thing maybe that we can do is giving the students different different topic. Yeah, for example, is what I did in the course of the ELT curriculum. So the students do have observations, and the observation is different each of the students. So for example, this is related to the assessment, but the students have observations on elementary level, and then the other students do the observations on high school level. So it is the same topic but different level. So it is like a strategy for make it that this is to raise the honesty of the students. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you. Yeah, and as you say, there's an educational aspect there because, you know, if we explain activities which are, you know, assessment for learning or for formative assessment, there is no advantage to cheating there. They're cheating themselves by taking, taking in corners, for instance. There is a day we're learning from those experiences, so that maybe that's part of the educational angle as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We've had so many questions and unfortunately time is against us. So
yes.
Can I just ask all the panel members just to share with us your concluding remarks, please, based on your, based on what we've heard today, based on what you've talked about and based on the questions that you've received. So if I could start with Pak Jati, please, just for your concluding remarks in a minute or so.
Okay, thank you very much, Kees. What should I say? AI has potentials for assessment for learning. I think it's worth trying. A lot of apps available, from free to paid apps, but there are some states, the mechanic things can be given to AI. Then teachers like us can concentrate more on the high level of order thinking, giving a more constructive suggestion and so on. That's all what I can say. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pak Jati. Will, over to you. Any concluding remarks from yourself, please?
Well, I was very interested in what Dr. Jati had to say in terms of AI performing some of the roles that teachers usually perform. So essentially, the students can work with the AI to do a certain part of their learning, but then the part that does actually require a teacher, the teacher can put all of their focus on that. So I think that's really, really interesting. I was also very interested in what Nur had to say about digital storytelling and the way that they worked around the COVID lockdown so they could still do their assessment, but not just still do it in an interesting, interactive, new, exciting way that the students really enjoyed. So I suppose my biggest conclusion from this is, although obviously COVID is a massive disaster in many, many ways, there are positives that we can draw from it so that we can improve the way that we assess language in the future.
Great summary. Well, thank you. And Ibu Nur, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you. Though we are in hard times in facing these conditions, we have to believe that there is this kind of a challenge and opportunities. As a teacher, we have to be creative in creating the assessment that have trying to digging up the students' potential and competence by having giving various measures and also various questions to students. The the other things is we teachers and educators should think about the impact of the assessment for the students, whether this is give beneficial for the students or not in the future, and also giving impact for the ability in the future. So we have to think about this. Thank you, Kiss.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A huge thanks to the panel for your contributions today. It's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you very much. If I could now move on and invite Professor Joko Nokanto, the president of TEFLN, if he could please share with us his closing remarks for the symposium for these 4 sessions. Pat Joko, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Kees, for the times. Okay, the Honorable Director of British Council Indonesia and team, distinguished speakers, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. On behalf of the TEFLN Executive Board, once again, I would like to express my deepest appreciation on the completion of the 3rd National Symposium on English Language Assessment 2020, organized by British Council in cooperation with TEFLN. I'm confident to say that the symposium this year is quite successful, as reflected by the large number of participants who joined the symposium and the high standard of presentation and discussion conducted by all the speakers in the symposium. I hope that future symposiums in years to come will be even more successful. In my view, there are 2 main topics in the symposium, namely the use of CEFR as the framework and standard of English language teaching. It is in session 1 and 2, and the use of IT in English language teaching and assessment in session 3 and 4. In my opinion, both of these topics are extremely relevant, especially in Indonesia at the present times. The use of CEFR in English language teaching in Indonesia is urgently needed, because to date, Indonesia does not yet have a clear, internationally recognized framework and standard. CEFR is a standard of framework that is used to illustrate level of language skills. This level are A1, beginners, A2, elementary, B1, intermediate, B2, upper intermediate, C1, advanced, and C2, proficient. I believe that the use of CEFR is vital to ensure that English language teaching in Indonesia has a standard comparable to that used in other countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, and so on. This gradation of language skill is relevant to the existing gradation in the Indonesian National Qualification Framework, or KKNI, as outlined in Presidential Decree number 8, 2012. The second topic, the topic is of IT utilization in English language teaching and assessment, is also highly relevant to the situation that is developing at the present time. In the current condition, where face-to-face learning in the classroom, at school, and on campus is impossible due to the potential spread of the coronavirus, technology or IT enable us to interact virtually and to carry out teaching and learning activities so that the learning can continue to take place in spite of the unfavorable situation. This has made us realize just how important the role of IT is in the world of education. Distinguished speaker and participant, allow me to go back to the first topic, CEFR. As a follow-up of the symposium, the TEFLN board had a small talk with the head of the Center of Curriculum and Book the day before yesterday, Tuesday, 21st of October, 2020. During this discussion, we proposed the use of CEFR as a framework for teaching and learning in Indonesia, especially for developing and designing curriculum starting from elementary school education to senior high school education. Alhamdulillah, our proposal was accepted by the head of the Center of Curriculum and Books, or Puskur Book. Yeah. Even we are involved in designing and developing the curriculum. For us, yeah, at Teflin, this is a remarkable achievement. This involvement of Teflin in the curriculum development means that the ideas presented by the speaker in the symposium will become a reality. In this context, we would be delighted if the British Council continues to offer its support to Teflin to ensure the best possible realizations of these ideas into practice. Distinguished speaker and participant, this is all I would like to highlight in relation to the third symposium on English language assessment 2020. Thank you very much, all the speaker and participant. Without you, there is no symposium. See you next week in the same symposium. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Many thanks, Pak Joko. That's great and really exciting developments by the sound of things. And obviously, I'm sure the British Council would be more than happy to support Teflin and others as we move forward. Okay, so very quickly from myself, just a few things. Firstly, I would like to just recap over the last 4 sessions. We have invited all participants to complete this assessment using one of our products called English Score. So very quickly, I'll just run through this. So English Score is a mobile test developed by the British Council. It's free, mobile-based, obviously, and as far as we're concerned, very accurate and available worldwide. It works on any modern smartphone, and obviously, uses and exploits the technology and has the benefit of removing, the costs and the practicalities of physical testing. And in particular, we're able to utilize the camera on your phone, for online identification. So again, it's building on this theme that we've touched on the last 2 sessions, exploiting technology as much as possible. So it's a free test. You have the option, and it's only an option, to pay for a British Council certificate. And that certificate will show your scores, which are both CFR related, and obviously that's a theme that we've covered in the last few sessions as well. And those scores will all relate to IELTS, for instance. The scores can be collated, but also broken down into individual sections. So that's reading, listening, grammar, and vocabulary. As I say, those results and certificates are endorsed by the British Council. And the reason that we have the camera working on the mobile is so that if needed, we can put the photo of the test taker on the certificate, for authenticity as a result of that. Each certificate also has a unique ID as well. So anyone looking at those results, they can verify them online as well. So all of that is optional and at an additional cost. But the app itself, the assessment itself, is free to use. And if you were to use this as an organization, this is what you could look at. So there's a dashboard with all the results. And if you remember, for example, we've been asking you to use a connect code, and that's highlighted there. So that's the connect code specific to our account. If you open your own account, you will get a connect code as well. So you would, for example, encourage your students to use the connect code associated with your account. And then once you're on the dashboard, you will get all the results. Again, the results are broken down by CFR, as we've talked about. And these are the results in terms of the actual numbers. And if you wish, you click on this button here and you'll get the results broken down as percentages as well. So you can toggle it depending on which is of interest to you. There's lots of features involved on this dashboard as well. So you can select the date. So for instance, if you do an assessment this week, you can specify this week's dates. And then if you do one the following week, you can specify those dates as well, and then you can compare. You can get the results for a specific period depending on when you use these assessments. You can filter your results depending on the CFR level, for example. So if you wanted to identify all those that got B2, for instance, click on B2, and then you'll get all those results. And obviously you can also export or download all the results as well onto an Excel spreadsheet. So a lot of functionality there within this dashboard for you to, look at the results, sort, filter, and export, as I said. And for us, it's been really interesting. So we've been promoting this tool worldwide. And in Indonesia, in the last couple of months, we've had an enormous take-up. So as you can see there, we've had nearly 45,000 people take the test in Indonesia in the last 2 months. And they've literally been from all over the country, as far east as I've forgotten the place now, sorry, and as far west as Aceh. Great opportunity for us to get an idea of national proficiency. And we're also able to break down those results as well into test takers. So we've had students, we've had teachers, we've had IELTS test takers, so we can identify and analyze the results for each of those different segments, and you would potentially be able to do the same as well. So it's a great tool. We'd encourage you to use it. You can sign up for free. There's a QR code there that we'd encourage you to use. And as I say, please sign up for free. Use it with your students and tell us what you think. Please give us feedback. It's a new tool. We're keen to improve it as much as we can. And obviously your feedback is really, really important to that. So please do check it out and then tell us what you think of it and how you've used it. Thank you for that. If I can move on and make some final announcements. The first one relates to our flagship New Directions English Language Assessment Conference. So we've been running this now. This year is the 8th year, and this conference is next week. That's Friday and Saturday, I think, next week. As you'll see there as well, we're privileged to have a number of Indonesian speakers, including Pak Joko. So we'd really encourage you to join the conference as a whole. You can register using that link there, and obviously, particularly, join us for those sessions by Indonesian speakers. Please, participate, engage, raise your questions as you've done today. That's been really, really welcomed by us, and we're very grateful for your support there. In addition to the actual conference, we've actually got some pre-conference activities as well. They've already started, but I believe the next one will be tomorrow. So on the next slide, we're able to share the details of that. Thank you. So these are the pre-conference workshops. And as I say, the next one on the 23rd of October, that's tomorrow. Again, utilize the QR codes and sign up for those events. And they run into next week, obviously, as well. And then finally, on the last slide, we'd also like to encourage you to sign up for another course, actually. This is one of the British Council's MOOCs. If you're not aware of it, MOOCs are massive open online courses. And we run these in partnership with FutureLearn. We are starting in the next couple of weeks another MOOC on language assessment in the classroom. So again, that's a perfect extension, really, I think, to what we've been talking about in the last 4 weeks. So please sign up for that. It's free. Again, we get participants from all over the world joining these, and it's really, really interactive. It's a great opportunity to share experience, to learn from other practitioners from all over the world. they've been great experiences. I've had the good fortune to participate myself as well. So would really encourage you to take advantage of this one. As I say, starts in a couple of weeks' time. So thank you very much. That brings us to the end of today's event. That also brings us to the end of the 4 events and the symposium this year. Once again, really grateful for everyone's contribution. Would like to extend our thanks to all of the speakers. If we could get the speakers to do the photo session, please. So all the speakers, if you could turn on your cameras one last time today, and we will take a virtual group photo. My colleagues will help us with this. Great, thank you very much to all our speakers again, and thank you again to all our participants. Please stay safe wherever you are. We've all talked about the challenging times, and obviously our health and safety is paramount, so please stay safe, stay in touch. And one last thing will be the survey. So we will finish the session now. If I can invite the speakers to join us in the post event conversation, but we'll leave the link to the survey for you to copy now. And once again, complete the survey. You can then access your e-certificate and the content from today's session. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe and stay in touch. Thank you.